Oh, sorry, guys. Hello? Hey, hello. I'm back on. Okay, everybody. We are live, and we are here looking for, we're here with Julian, a yoga instructor and teacher. And my name is Darrell Handwerger. And we are here today because of the amount of emotion that is going on. Julian and myself are both Surfside residents. We've lived in Surfside. We are personally involved in what is going on here. And I, as a integrative practitioner, and Julian, who's a yoga instructor who incorporates the mind, body, and spirit together, wanted to come on today to share our just some words that we could help the community out. So I wanted to introduce Julian. Julian, how you doing? And welcome to Integrative Insights. And today we're going to talk about anxiety and how we can really have an integrative approach to this great deal of anxiety that we're all experiencing.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, Darrell, for putting this together and for inviting me to participate. My name, again, is Julian, and I was a Surfside resident for almost 4 years. I became a yoga instructor while I was living in Surfside, and one of the reasons was to be able to provide more options for people to practice yoga in the community, especially outside of the studio environment. A lot of people expressed anxiety and they're adverse to the cost. So most of the yoga instruction is free. We give free classes on the beach a couple days a week, and we're ready to discuss some of the tips and techniques to help people that are dealing with tremendous amounts of anxiety at this time and uncertainty.
Right. As I was leaving today, my community to come to the office here, you could feel the feel the this kind of adrenaline pumping through everyone's veins. Basically, you couldn't. Not only did we have, of course, the president and the governor visiting, all the emergency vehicles, sirens all the time. It's this sympathetic mode that I, as an integrative practitioner, I see the effects that being in that overdrive of that sympathetic mode, sympathetic nervous system, the effects it can have on a person's health. And that is an important connection I would like to focus on for the next few minutes here, about how we can help with this sympathetic overdrive. And yoga is the perfect way of doing that. So, Julian, how can we use yoga to really help with what's going on today in Surfside?
That's a great question. When you're speaking of the totality of yoga and not just what you see people posing on Instagram, yoga is actually compiled of 8 parts. And amongst those parts, there, besides the physical practice, there are rules to which to govern yourself with. And then there's also techniques such as breathing and meditating that can also be used in conjunction with the stretching in order to help activate the opposite, the parasympathetic nervous system. And what's interesting is that by activating your parasympathetic nervous system, it has an inverse relationship to your sympathetic nervous system, essentially reducing your body's fight or flight response. So there's several techniques, and there's probably many more beyond this conversation that can be practiced or can be utilized in an effort to help to reduce that fight or flight response that the body wants to take when it's overly agitated.
Right, right. So for everyone out watching us today, that our nervous system is really divided into these two parts, and one of them is this part where we do feel when we're undergoing stress. Now, this could be what we say perceived stress. It doesn't have to be this event that's happening all around us. It could be within our own minds that we are making this stress within us. So the sympathetic nervous system has this increase in cortisol and adrenaline that eventually drives not only blood sugars, all kinds of metabolic pathways and conditions to a state where it even affects our heart rate. And they have this term that we called broken heart syndrome, where actually the emotions and a certain stress can actually physically affect the heart. So when we talk about the other side of the sympathetic, the parasympathetic side, we call that the rest and digest, because that's the mode that we're able to better digest food, and where actually our heart rate goes down. So in integrative medicine, what we use is heart rate variability, and that shows us if a person is in this balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, Julian, in yoga, what are the ways that you help people get into that parasympathetic mode?
That's a great question. But before we go there, I would like to take a step back. And I think there's an important thing to point out here, and that has to do with the subject of stress. We live in a society, everybody has stress, and it seems like this is a stressful society. A lot of people are agitated or over agitated. So when a tragedy or a situation like this takes place, it's a system that's already overloaded, that's just taking more load on. What's important to distinguish, though, is that not all stress is quote unquote bad stress. You have two different types of stress. You have distress, which is what oftentimes we just refer to as stress, but there's also eustress. And eustress has the capacity to help strengthen our body, to strengthen our responses, so that when we do encounter distress, it is less distressful. So an example is doing exercise. Like when you're doing exercise, your body is technically in a state of stress, but the way that you feel almost euphoric, maybe not during, but oftentimes after, that's a great example of eustress. So it's not necessarily about removing the stresses from our life, because in modern day society, it's probably close to impossible, unless you're willing to move out to the mountains, to an ashram, and spend all of your days meditating and praying. If short of that, you are going to encounter stress and distress, and even in an ashram, maybe suddenly there's a tiger or some kind of a predator that you have to get away from. So as a result, it's important for us to learn how to shift the stress, and just the way that you perceive what is causing the stress, or how you can handle that stress, is very relevant in how our body reacts to it. So let's start that, starting with that. Now, to go to your question about what are some things we can do in yoga, or the asana practice, the physical movement in yoga, to help to activate our parasympathetic nervous system and get ourselves out of the sympathetic response. Two things that are very simple to do. Number one is breathing, conscious, controlled breathing exercises. And number two is inversions. And by inversions, it doesn't necessarily mean handstands or headstands or all the stuff you see on Instagram. By definition, an inversion is any time where your legs are above your torso and where your head is below your chest. The purpose being that you are flipping the body's natural movement of things. So whereas the body is constantly having to push blood up into the brain, and it's all kind of sitting down at your feet and at your legs, when you flip it, what you are doing is you are telling the body, hey, I'm I'm in a relaxed state here. I'm in a purposefully in a state where I don't feel like I need to quickly respond or react to something. And as a result, the longer you spend in some of these poses, the more benefit you can get as far as activation of the parasympathetic. And one of the easiest ways that's accessible to almost everybody, young and old. We've worked with people in their 90s, and they're able to do this as well. One of the easiest ways to activate the parasympathetic nervous system is to simply lay on your back against the wall and raise your legs up against the wall. Use the wall to support your legs. So, even if you're not physically in a state where you feel like you can really do too much, as long as you can lay down and as long as you can rest your legs on a wall, that's usually a really great place to start the parasympathetic activation.
Mm-hmm. Those are some excellent tips. Thank you, Julian. I know with anxiety, a lot of people are talking to me. I'm walking throughout the community, talk at the community center where a lot of the family members are, trying to be there. And in holistic nursing, which I've been really been talking about lately, there is this idea of authentic presence, just being there for someone, as opposed to feeling like you have to say words of comfort. What is the idea of how could yoga, with its putting a person more in mindfulness, how could that help someone with this idea of authentic presence, where they can just be there for someone?
That's a great question. What I would say to that is, one of the strives or one of the main purposes of the whole yoga system is to try to bring yourself more into the present moment. When the physical aspect of yoga was created, which it was created much more recently, one of the main purposes of it was people that would say, I can't meditate. I can't sit still. My mind is going 100 miles an hour. I've got all these worries and all these stresses. I can't meditate. And if you think about it, what meditation is simply just sitting, breathing, and being. So imagine somebody feeling that they are not capable of something so simple as just sitting and breathing and being still. So being present, and how can, yoga can absolutely help with becoming present based on how you approach the practice and how you pursue the practice. Meaning, if you practice the physical aspect of yoga, the asana practice, and the entire time you're thinking about what's going to happen after, what anxiety about, who needs my help, what's going on with my cell phone, then it's tough for you to be able to share that genuine presence with somebody because you yourself are not present. But if you use the practice as an opportunity to be present with yourself and to really feel and to listen to the instructor if you're being instructed and to understand the intricacies of your body. For a lot of people, it's very interesting because we'll give cues like press your right hip forward, pull your left hip backward. And at first, someone might not even be aware in how to take a cue so simple as that because they're just not used to manipulating a specific area or part of their body. So with the yoga practice, by you diving into it and earnestly attempting to practice yoga, you are potentially training yourself, or you're providing the space for you to be able to more completely understand what is happening in your body at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
One of the advices from one of my yoga teachers is, once you feel relatively confident practicing yoga, try to do it closing your eyes. And when you close your eyes and you're able to move and you're able to trust the process and you're not worried about how you look in the eyes of others and you're not worried about if you're doing things correctly or incorrectly, and you simply understand that any honest and earnest attempt is a correct attempt, then it can help you practice being present. And then going to what your question was about how we can be more present for people that are suffering, something that Darrell and I spoke about before this, preparing for this, was I strongly believe in the power of breathing. And of course, it's such something we take for granted, but our life in modern society is measured by the first breath we take all the way until the last breath. And in some Hindu books, they believe that the body even continues to breathe after internally, after our lungs stop breathing. So breath is incredibly important. We're doing it all day, every day. And if it wasn't something that was happening automatically for us, it would be tough. Survival would be tough if we had to think about taking every single breath. So what I like to encourage people to consider is take a moment to breathe, and take a moment to breathe consciously, take a moment to breathe purposefully, and see what a difference that makes. And a great example is, people, especially when you're younger, a lot of people, when they're going to do something scary, jump off of a tall something into the water, high dive board, or you're going to get on a motorcycle for the first time or anything like that. Oftentimes the body's natural reaction when your heart rate is running is to take a deep breath, right? People are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to take a deep breath before I'm going to do this scary thing. And that's the type of practice we're talking about, because by you taking that deep breath consciously and holding it in, you are effectively slowing down your heart rate. Granted, it doesn't necessarily remove the anxiety, it doesn't necessarily remove the stress, but it reduces the body's reaction to that stress. And it starts moving the body away from a state of distress and starts moving it towards eustress. And when it comes to tough situations where you have to make quick decisions, if your body is betraying you because your arm's not working, because you're so anxious and your heart rate is through the roof, then chances are that you are not going to be as effective in that important moment. But if you have a breathing practice and you have a breathing exercise or a couple go-to breathing exercises that you can do in those moments, the moment that you start to identify or recognize that the heart rate's elevating, the nervousness is coming on, if at that moment you can nip it in the bud and say, all right, stop, I'm going to breathe for 30 seconds, I'm going to breathe for a minute, 2 minutes. After that, the likelihood is that you are going to allow your body the space to clear your thoughts, to clear your mind, and reapproach that situation from a calmer, from a more clear-minded standpoint. And many times that's the difference between effectively being able to handle a situation like this or just completely succumbing to the circumstances. And it's a spiral effect. When you feel out of control and when you don't believe there's anything you can do to bring it back into control, then more anxiety kicks in, then potentially depression can kick in, and questions about self-worth can kick in. And it's an unfortunate downward spiral.
So breathing is essential here. And we're seeing a lot of, with anxiety, shortness of breath.
Yes.
And some of the simple things we were doing over the last couple of nights that I see that were helping was even a cup of cocoa, actually, which is something as a bronchodilator, or green tea. We were using some natural ways, natural therapies to really help people, bringing them, for example, a cup of green tea, which is a natural dilator. But talking about breathing and yoga, what I'm noticing out there is people's changing the way that they're standing. And when these situations occur, which is so emotional, people are changing their posture, and that's affecting their breathing. Could you tell us how yoga affects that whole idea about posture and breathing?
That is such a great point to bring up. And we were discussing this a little before. It's not just when you're in the thick of the situation that's going on. But I'm sure a lot of people like myself have spent a great deal of time over the past week watching the television, reading news on the phone, reading news on the computer. And what happens is that if we spend extended periods of time in poor posture positions, as we age, as our bodies get older, what will start to happen is that the potential to undo some of those poor posture things becomes more and more challenging, especially the upper thoracic area, where people start to develop sort of a hunch. Oftentimes, that has to do with a long period of time in poor posture. So one of the most important things, and one of the aims for the asana practice of yoga has to do with the posture. And you'll hear oftentimes yoga teachers mentioning, extend your head up, roll your shoulders back, suck your stomach in, sit up taller. Those are the kind of cues that you want to do. And especially if you find yourself spending a lot of time seated. If not just because of what recently happened, but if you have a job where you have to drive a lot, or you have a job where you're in front of the computer a lot, it's incredibly important that wherever you're spending or however you're spending an extended amount of time, that you're conscious of your posture during that time. So the cues that I just shared, rolling the shoulders back, rolling the shoulders up, back, and away, squeezing your stomach in, extending long through your neck. Those are just minor things that if you catch yourself during the day on the computer and you're slouched up like this, you can just take those little cues, and at least you are actively attempting to not allow that to become what your long-term body shape will become. Now, going to what you were saying, it's a really great point. So people have a tendency to hold stress in multiple parts of their body, but the two parts of the body that are most common is the shoulders and the hips, right? You'll hear people say all the time, oh, I've got really tight hips, oh, I've got neck pain, I've got shoulder pain. And what I have found from my experience as a teacher in yoga is that a lot of it has to do with posture, but then when you are in a situation where, let's say, the distress kicks in, or an unexpected moment happens, you're going to further express from your posture. So if you're already hunched over and you're a little bit more regularly in this position, then when you feel anxious, you're gonna maybe shrug the shoulders. And effectively what you're doing is you're shortening the space in your trapezius muscle. For myself personally, I used to suffer from headaches, and everybody's experience is different, but my headaches appear to have been some part related to tightness in the trapezius. So just taking gentle stretches of the neck, and the cervical spine is awesome in the sense that it doesn't require a lot of movement or a lot of manipulation to gain benefit. Simply dropping your chin to your chest and circling your head around a few times a day in each direction can be incredibly effective in combating these types of posture plus anxiety situations that over time lead to potentially more pain and more distress. And then when it comes to the hips and the legs, something very important has to do with sitting. The way that we sit in society today, in modern society, is really bad for our physical well-being. When we're sitting in a chair, our posterior muscles, so the hamstrings, the glutes, the hips, they're neither fully contracted or fully relaxed. It's kind of in between. So as a result of spending an extended amount of time in these positions, we tend to lose range of motion. And then that's why people suddenly, they can't forward fold. They can't, they have a hard time tying their shoes. So one thing that I recommend, if it's accessible to people, is to try sitting on the floor sometimes, cross-legged, legs out in front. If you're in a situation where you require some support for your back, sit up against the wall. Sit up against a column. I've got these cool chairs for the ground that they're just that. It's just a back support, and that's it. But just sitting on the ground is very, very beneficial. And then the other thing to do, and for people that are less mobile, it's a little more challenging, but doing essentially a squat position. In yoga, it's called malasana pose, or we call it the yogi squat. Legs wide apart and kind of sitting in between your legs with your posterior hovering above the ground. That's really good for inner thigh, outer hip opening. And that is our natural seated position. Around the world, babies are born in that position. In Asian cultures, people eat in that position. In other parts of the world, people use the restroom in that position. It's just in our Western society, we have abandoned almost entirely this like squatted seated position. And as a result, again, if we are not ever really sitting properly and suddenly now we have an anxiety or stress, then chances are we're going to dump that into our hips. And it's like we're just interlacing more drama, more trauma, more stuff, that the only way to undo that is by very gently introducing movement and motion until finally we'll get to a point where we feel comfortable again. And it's very important to understand that yoga is not, the asana practice especially, it's not a competitive sport. It's not a matter of, I can do this one, I can't do that one, I'll never get to touching my toes. It doesn't matter. It's a practice of you with you. So if by you practicing malasana, yoga squat, once a day for 30 seconds, if that means that in a month you're able to do it more comfortably or get lower, great. Maybe your body type is one where you'll never get into the deepest full expression. That's fine. That's fine. Any amount of progress you make in an asana like that one is going to be incredibly beneficial in the long term.
That's an excellent. So let's bring it down to where people today, because it's an incredibly emotional, stressful time right now. I've never seen anything like it. I've been as a nurse and nurse practitioner. I've dealt with grieving and death and life and death, the cycle. This has been unlike anything I've ever seen, and it's had to take everything I've learned about in holistic nursing, authentic presence, which we talked about, but also what's called respite care. In other words, as caretakers, we needed a break away from the constant stress. And this is why we're talking today about how a person can take that moment. We found that even if you could just step out of that room where the person was dying, for just a few moments and reset, that made all the difference. And that's why we're speaking about this today, this integrative approach to health, because we do see that part of stress is resilience, coming back, allowing the body is extremely resilient. And how can we do that? Well, it's what we talked about today with breathing and posture and yoga stretches and yoga positions. But there's one more thing I is very important, and that's appreciation that all of us are feeling now, because we see the uncertainty in life, and therefore it's raining right now, and I see people appreciating the rain,
Right.
and they're appreciating every moment, and that is so important. Gratitude and appreciation. So if we could bring it down, what we're saying is, if you could show us and about how to take that deep breath, close your eyes, think gratitude, appreciation of someone you love, of the loved ones that we are thinking about. How would you take that? If we could show them before we sign off, what could they do? The people that are watching us in this moment of dire emotions, show us how we could take that breath. and close our eyes and think appreciative and grateful thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the easiest thing to do is literally to just close your eyes and visualize. For some
Mm-hmm.
people, what's more effective for them is to think about a favorite place they like to go to. Another thing is to think about their loved ones. You know, as some people say, count your blessings, sort of a thing. Um, but it is important. It's incredibly important to find a balance, to find, what's the balance between my high stress, high intensity life style, and how am I taking the time? How am I making breaks in that, in order to allow my body to recover from the more intense moments? So
Mm-hmm.
the easiest breathing exercise to do is just simply close your eyes,
Mm-hmm.
close your mouth. Breathing in and out through the nose is another fantastic way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And just do a few rounds of breathing in for 5, 7, 10 seconds, holding it for 5, 7, 10 seconds, exhaling it for 5, 7, 10 seconds. And I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend doing that 3, 4, 5 cycles. And maybe after each one, pay attention to how you feel after. But most importantly, pay attention to at the end of having
Mm-hmm.
completed 3, 4, 5 rounds, how do you feel? So once you're done breathing, taking a moment, still with your eyes closed, to scan your body and
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to any sensations or any areas of your body that feel like they shifted or changed as a result
Mm-hmm.
of just sitting and breathing.
And in addition, possibly thinking appreciative types of thoughts, because I found with the what we call heart math, which is helping people get into coherence with that parasympathetic mode, which is bringing down that heart rate. There's this idea of thinking gratitude, thoughts of gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
appreciation. So there's that idea of visualization, meaning when you're closing your eyes and you're taking that deep breath, think those thoughts of something that'll bring your system into that mode of total appreciation, relaxation of a loved one, of somewhere that a place that's a quiet place that you feel very peaceful about, whether it's the beach or somewhere where you can feel very relaxed. So you can visualize that in your mind, and that is very powerful. That visualization allows brings so much to the body. So it's not just it is closing your eyes and breathing, and that is really all important. But visualize visualize that happy place,
Mm-hmm.
that person that you love, or even a pet, or anything that brings you that appreciation and gratefulness. And then top to bring that also with that posturing. Now you're really bringing a lot together, and this is what we wanted to help our community to get today, uh, just with a few of these practical tips. And that's what integrative medicine is bringing in the physical, which is kind of what I do with cortisol and stress and adrenaline and the damages that does to the body. With what you do, the yoga, posture, breathing, visualization, mindfulness, a person can do that today. A person who's struggling, like we all are out there in Surfside, can just take that deep breath if you can, and visualize something good. Come to and then change that posture, even if it is for a minute. You're going to do something that your loved ones who were waiting and hoping, and your loved ones want you to be healthy. I remember when I went through stresses in and dealing with life and death situations with my loved ones. I remember that I always thought that they wanted us to be healthy. They didn't want us to go down with them and take our own health down with what's happening to them. So we came on today to bring these tips to you and for you, and thank you, Julian. Thank you very much for that, for coming and joining us today with this. And if anyone out there finds this useful, please share it to other people that might need to see this today, and let us know. We'll come on more and with these more tips and more help from our integrative practice, bringing the mind, body, spirit together. So yeah, so this has been a really something that we want to be a service to our community, since Julian and I both are part of this community. Both of our ways of wanting to help people stemmed from being here with our friends and family to want to help them in health. Julian with the mind and the yoga and mindfulness. Myself with the underlying pathways and the root cause of disease and functional medicine. So thank you, Julian. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for being with us on this on our talk today, on our integrative discussion. And all we want is what we would love to see is healing, a healing, and that is what we really are praying for today.
Thank you, Darrell. And if I want to encourage, if anybody has any specific questions or they want to share something maybe they're specifically going through, or maybe something that they're stuck on, feel free to reach out to Darrell, send a message, or you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is JFALGONS. Feel free to send me a message and say, hey, I'm going through this. Do you have any additional advice or tips on how to cope with this or how to handle this? And Darrell and I are here to serve, especially our community. So do not hesitate to ask for help or to ask for clarification or guidance for anything that you're going through.
Right. Yes, and thank you, Julian, for that, for letting people know, because we want to be here, because it is our community and it's our friends and family. This is very personal, and this is where integrative medicine comes in, is the mind, body, spirit. That is what's going to help keep us going, and understanding the deep parts of that mind and spirit part is essential to that complete picture of health. And so we're going to be here for you out there in our communities and just out there who could use this information. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Darrell.
Thank you.